I woke up to the soft, golden light streaming through the curtains, painting our bedroom in warm hues. The familiar scent of coffee wafted through the air, mingling with the crispness of the early morning. As I rolled over, I expected to see my wife, Julia, peacefully asleep beside me. But the space where she usually lay was empty, the sheets cool to the touch. I rubbed my eyes and sat up, a sense of unease creeping into my chest. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of strange behavior from Julia. She had become distant, often lost in her thoughts, and frequently left the house for meetings or errands. When I asked her about it, she would give me vague answers that only deepened my suspicions. "Just some work stuff," she would say, brushing off my concerns with a wave of her hand. It was as if a curtain had fallen between us, separating the warmth and intimacy we once shared. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As I swung my legs over the side of the bed, I felt an icy knot forming in my stomach. I made my way to the kitchen, where the coffee pot bubbled gently. Julia had prepared breakfast, a rare treat these days. A plate of toast sat on the counter, alongside a small bowl of berries. The sight was comforting, but my mind was elsewhere. I poured myself a cup of coffee, taking a moment to breathe in the rich aroma, but even the warmth of the mug couldn't chase away my growing anxiety. After a few minutes, I heard the sound of the front door opening and closing. My heart raced as I turned to see Julia entering the kitchen. Her face lighting up with a smile that felt oddly forced. She wore a sundress, one I had seen her wear before, but somehow it seemed different, as if it was a mask she was putting on for me. "Good morning, love," she chirped, but I could detect a tremor in her voice. "Morning," I replied, trying to keep my tone casual, despite the storm of emotions brewing inside me. "Where were you?" "Oh, just a quick trip to the store," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. The way she avoided my gaze made my heart sink further. "Did you get everything we needed?" I pressed, trying to sound nonchalant, but the tension in the air was palpable. "Yeah, all good," she said, stirring her coffee and finally meeting my eyes. But there was something in her gaze that unsettled me, a flicker of guilt? A hint of something she wasn't telling me? I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The conversation shifted to mundane topics, work, the weather, plans for the weekend, but my mind was racing with unanswered questions. Why had she been so elusive lately? Who was she meeting? I felt like a detective piecing together fragments of a puzzle, each missing piece feeding my suspicion. As we sat at the table, eating our breakfast in silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that our life together was crumbling, the foundation shaking beneath us. I had always trusted Julia implicitly, but now doubt seeped into my thoughts like a slow poison. After breakfast, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The fresh air would help, I thought. As I stepped outside, the sun bathed everything in a golden glow, but the beauty of the day did little to ease my troubled heart. I wandered the familiar streets, my mind replaying the past few weeks, the late nights, the evasive texts, the way she seemed to flinch when I got too close. With every step, the weight of my suspicions grew heavier. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the woman I loved was slipping away from me, inch by inch. The question loomed large in my mind: what was Julia hiding? And more importantly, what would I do when I found out the truth? The day dragged on, each hour stretching into what felt like an eternity. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting back to Julia. My stomach churned with unease as I replayed our earlier conversation. The way she smiled, the evasiveness in her eyes, it all felt so wrong. I was in the middle of drafting a report when my phone buzzed, jolting me from my thoughts. The caller ID showed it was Mark, a mutual friend of ours. I hadn't spoken to him in a while, so I answered, hoping for a welcome distraction. "Hey, Mark, what's up?" I said, forcing a cheerful tone despite the heaviness in my heart. "David, glad I caught you. I wanted to talk about something I've heard," Mark said, his voice laced with a seriousness that made me tense up. "What is it?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "Well, it's about Julia," he began, hesitating for a moment. My stomach dropped, and a cold wave of dread washed over me. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but I thought you should know. I've seen her spending quite a bit of time with Josh." Josh. My heart sank at the mention of his name. He was Julia's ex-boyfriend, someone I had never really liked. Their past had always hung over our relationship like a dark cloud, and now, hearing Mark say his name sent a chill down my spine. "What do you mean? Spending time together? Like, how often?" I stammered, struggling to keep my voice steady. Look, I know it sounds bad, but I've seen them together a few times. They've been meeting for drinks, and I overheard them at the bar last weekend. They were laughing, looking pretty close. I thought you should know because, well, I know how much you care about her. Every word he spoke felt like a dagger piercing through my chest. I wanted to dismiss it, to tell Mark he was overreacting, that there was probably a perfectly innocent explanation. But deep down, I felt a gnawing sense of fear and betrayal. Are you sure? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It could be innocent, right? Maybe they're just catching up. I wish it were that simple, David. I do. But the way they were interacting, it didn't feel like just old friends. It felt different. I'm sorry, man. I thought you should hear it from me, Mark said, his tone sympathetic yet firm. I felt like the ground had been pulled from beneath me. My thoughts spiraled, crashing into one another like waves against a rocky shore. How could this be happening? The woman I loved, my wife, was spending time with a man who had once held a piece of her heart. Thanks for telling me, Mark, I managed to say, my voice heavy with emotion. I need some time to process this. Of course. I'm here if you need to talk, he replied before hanging up. I stared at my phone, the silence of the room deafening. The walls seemed to close in around me, and I felt an overwhelming mix of anger and sadness wash over me. I had never felt so betrayed, so utterly lost. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. This wasn't just a rumor, Mark was someone I trusted. If there was even a hint of truth in what he said, everything I knew about my life with Julia was about to change irrevocably. I needed to confront her, but the thought of doing so filled me with dread. Would I be able to handle what I might uncover? The anxiety clawed at me, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. I had to find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, I felt a sense of determination rising within me. I couldn't allow this to go unanswered. I would uncover the truth, and whatever lay on the other side, I would face it head-on. The thought of Julia and Josh together was unbearable, and I knew I had to confront my fears. After my conversation with Mark, I was a man possessed. The gnawing feeling of betrayal festered inside me, transforming my love for Julia into a burning desire for the truth. I had always prided myself on being a trusting husband, but now doubt clouded my thoughts. I needed proof, something tangible to hold onto, before confronting her. The following day, I found myself pacing the apartment, glancing at the clock with each passing minute. Julia was due home late that evening, and I had a sinking feeling that she would be out with Josh again. The thought made my skin crawl, and I knew I couldn't just sit idly by. I started by surveying her usual haunts. I drove around town, visiting the coffee shop where she often met friends, the gym she claimed to frequent, and even the park where they used to hang out. My heart raced with every turn of the wheel, a mix of adrenaline and fear driving me forward. I kept a low profile, hoping not to draw attention to myself. But each place felt like another reminder of the life I was losing. I returned home that evening, feeling defeated. It was time to take matters into my own hands. I knew I shouldn't, but the thought of going through her things was overwhelming. I justified it to myself, I was looking out for my marriage. I needed to know if my suspicions had any foundation. With a racing heart, I approached her bedside table, my hands trembling as I opened the drawer. Inside were a few books, some loose change, and a small jewelry box. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me, but I pushed it aside, determined to find answers. I sifted through the clutter, hoping to find something, anything, that could confirm my fears. Then, my eyes landed on her phone, lying innocently on the nightstand. My heart pounded as I picked it up, my palms slick with sweat. I knew it was wrong, but desperation clouded my judgment. I quickly unlocked it, and a rush of anxiety surged through me as I navigated to her messages. As I scrolled through, a mix of relief and dread washed over me. Most of her conversations were mundane, chatting with friends, planning dinner parties, discussing work. But then, I stumbled upon a conversation that made my blood run cold. It was a series of messages with Josh. At first, they seemed harmless enough, a few light-hearted jokes, a shared meme. But as I read further, my heart dropped. The tone shifted. They were discussing plans to meet up, with Julia saying, "I can't wait to see you again." Just us two. Rage bubbled up inside me as I continued reading. She talked about missing him, reminiscing about old times, and how it felt so right to be back in touch. Each message felt like a betrayal, each word a dagger to my heart. My hands shook as I read her responses, the laughter they shared feeling like an affront to our life together. At that moment, I felt a fire ignite within me. It was as if the ground beneath me had shifted, and I was filled with a potent mix of anger and sadness. How could she do this? How could she betray everything we had built together? The memories of our life together, the vacations, the late-night talks, the quiet moments shared, began to flash through my mind like a montage, each one tainted by the knowledge of her betrayal. I slammed the phone down, my heart racing as I fought to control my emotions. I felt an overwhelming urge to confront her right then and there, to demand answers, to make her feel the pain she had inflicted upon me. But I knew I needed to be strategic. I couldn't let my anger cloud my judgment. I needed to gather more evidence, to ensure I had everything I needed before I unleashed my fury. With renewed determination, I began to take screenshots of the messages, documenting everything I found. I saved their conversations, carefully noting the dates and times, convinced that this evidence would serve as my shield when the confrontation came. I needed to be ready for whatever she would throw at me. And I had to be prepared to fight for the truth. As I sat there, alone in the dim light of our bedroom, I realized I was no longer the trusting husband I once was. I had become a man driven by suspicion, a detective in my own life. The love I felt for Julia was still there, buried beneath the layers of betrayal and deceit, but it was suffocated by anger. I felt like a stranger in my own home, and the weight of that realization settled heavily on my chest. With each passing moment, the reality of what was happening sank in deeper. I was losing my wife, the woman I had vowed to love and cherish. And yet, I couldn't help but feel a sense of empowerment. I was taking control of my narrative, ready to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it would be. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, and I knew the time for confrontation was drawing near. The sun was beginning to set as I left the office that day, casting long shadows across the pavement. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, replaying the evidence I had uncovered. I couldn't shake the image of Julia and Josh's messages from my head. Each word echoed like a taunt, pushing me further into a spiral of anger and disbelief. I needed to confront her, but part of me still clung to a thread of hope that maybe it was all just a misunderstanding. I decided to stop by our favorite cafe, a quaint little place with rustic charm and cozy corners. It had always been our go-to spot for brunches and lazy Sunday mornings. As I walked in, the familiar smell of freshly brewed coffee and pastries filled the air, mingling with the soft chatter of other patrons. But as I scanned the room, my heart dropped. There, nestled in a corner booth, sat Julia and Josh. I felt as if the ground had shifted beneath me, the world around me fading into a blur. Time seemed to slow as I took in the scene before me, Julia's laughter ringing out like music, her eyes sparkling with a warmth I had once believed was reserved for me. Josh leaned in closer, a smirk on his face, clearly enjoying her attention. I stood frozen just inside the door, my heart racing as a wave of nausea washed over me. I wanted to look away, to convince myself that I was imagining things, but I couldn't tear my eyes from the spectacle unfolding before me. The way they interacted was casual yet intimate, and it felt like a punch to the gut. Each laugh, each shared glance was a dagger twisting deeper into my heart. I felt a storm of emotions, betrayal, anger, and heartbreak crashing over me like relentless waves. My palms were clammy as I gripped my phone tightly, the urge to record this moment fighting against the instinct to turn and run. I was torn, unsure of what to do next. Should I confront them right here, in the middle of our cafe, or should I retreat and gather my thoughts? In that moment of hesitation, a surge of adrenaline coursed through me. I couldn't just stand there and do nothing. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Taking a deep breath, I made my way toward their booth, each step feeling like a march to my doom. As I approached, Julia turned her head, and our eyes locked. For a split second, the smile on her face faltered, and I could see the color drain from her cheeks. I felt a surge of satisfaction at the realization that she hadn't expected to see me here, but it was quickly overshadowed by the hurt that surged through me. "David," she exclaimed, her voice a mix of surprise and panic. I could see her mentally scrambling for an explanation, but I wasn't in the mood for niceties. My heart pounded in my chest as I faced them both. the weight of the truth heavy on my shoulders. What the hell is going on here? I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside me. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks as I struggled to keep my composure. Josh looked up, feigning innocence, but I could see the smugness lurking beneath the surface. "Hey, man, it's not what it looks like," Josh said, leaning back in his seat, trying to act casual. But the nonchalance of his demeanor only infuriated me further. "Really? Because it looks pretty damn clear to me." I shot back, my gaze shifting between them. Julia's eyes were wide, a mix of fear and guilt etched across her face. "David, I can explain," she started, her voice trembling, but I cut her off. "Explain what? That you've been lying to me? That you've been meeting up with him behind my back?" My voice was rising, the anger bubbling to the surface. "We were just catching up. It's nothing like you think," Julia insisted, her voice rising in pitch as she tried to defend herself. "Nothing like I think?" I echoed, disbelief flooding my senses. "You think I don't see the way you look at him? The way you laugh together? You're betraying everything we built." The cafe had fallen silent, the eyes of the other patrons boring into us as the confrontation escalated. I could feel the heat of embarrassment creeping up my neck, but I didn't care. I was past the point of caring about appearances. "David, please," Julia pleaded, her voice shaking. "It was just a few meetings. I swear, it didn't mean anything." But her words fell on deaf ears. I could see the truth reflected in Josh's smirk, in Julia's desperate attempts to justify herself. My heart shattered into a million pieces as the reality of the situation crashed down around me. "I can't believe you would do this to me," I whispered, the hurt piercing through my anger. I turned to leave, the pain unbearable, but I couldn't just walk away without saying one last thing. "I hope you're both happy together. You deserve each other." As I walked out of the cafe, the weight of betrayal settled heavily on my chest. My heart felt like it was breaking with each step I took, but deep down, I knew I had to take control of my life again. This was the moment everything changed, and though the road ahead was dark and uncertain, I couldn't let them have the power to destroy me. I would find a way to reclaim my life, no matter the cost. The days following that fateful encounter at the cafe were a blur of anger and heartbreak. Each morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach, reliving the moment I confronted Julia and Josh. The memory haunted me like a shadow, but it ignited a fire within me, a burning desire for revenge. I knew I couldn't let this go unpunished. Julia's betrayal felt like a personal affront, and I needed to expose the truth to the people we both cared about. I wanted to show everyone what kind of person she really was, and more importantly, what kind of man Josh was. They had crossed a line, and I was determined to make them pay. As I sat at my kitchen table one evening, I began to devise a plan. Our mutual friend, Tom, had a birthday coming up, and I decided to turn the occasion into the perfect opportunity. I envisioned a gathering at our house, inviting all our closest friends for a dinner party to celebrate. It would be a casual evening, filled with laughter and good food, but I had a hidden agenda. I crafted the invitation carefully, sending out a group message that read, "Hey everyone. I'm throwing a little birthday dinner for Tom this Friday at 7 p.m. Would love for you all to come and celebrate together. Let's make it a night to remember." As the RSVPs rolled in, I felt a sense of excitement mixed with anxiety. Friends were eager to attend, thrilled at the prospect of a gathering after such a long time. Little did they know that the evening would be anything but ordinary. In the days leading up to the dinner, I focused on the details, making sure everything was perfect. I planned the menu meticulously, choosing dishes that I knew everyone loved. A rich lasagna, a fresh garden salad, and a decadent chocolate cake for dessert. I wanted the atmosphere to be warm and inviting, the kind of evening that would put everyone at ease. But underneath that facade of normalcy, my heart raced with anticipation. I envisioned the moment when I would unveil the truth, the shocked expressions on my friends' faces as they absorbed the betrayal. I imagined the chaos that would ensue, the fallout of Julia and Josh's deceit laid bare for everyone to see. As the day of the dinner approached, I grew increasingly nervous. I practiced my speech in front of the mirror, rehearsing how I would break the news without revealing too much too soon. I wanted to maximize the impact, to build suspense before unleashing the full weight of the truth. "Hey everyone, thanks for coming," I envisioned myself saying. "I know we're here to celebrate Tom's birthday, but there's something else I need to address. Something you all need to know about Julia and Josh. I could almost hear the gasps, the murmurs of disbelief, the confusion spreading through the room. On the day of the gathering, I spent the afternoon preparing, chopping vegetables, and layering the lasagna. With each movement, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. I had never been one to seek revenge, but this felt justified. I was reclaiming my narrative, taking back the power that had been stripped from me. As the clock ticked closer to 7 p.m., I set the table, lighting candles, and arranging everything perfectly. The warm glow created an inviting atmosphere, masking the storm brewing within me. I dressed in my best shirt, wanting to look composed and put together, despite the turmoil inside. Finally, as the first guests began to arrive, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I greeted everyone with a smile, engaging in small talk, all the while suppressing the chaotic emotions swirling inside me. I knew I had to maintain a facade of normalcy until the moment was right. As the evening progressed, laughter filled the air. Glasses clinked, and stories flowed. Tom was the center of attention, basking in the warmth of friendship and celebration. I played my part, chatting and laughing along, but the anticipation was almost unbearable. With every passing minute, I felt the weight of the truth pressing down on me. The time to reveal what I had planned was drawing near, and I needed to make sure I had everyone's attention. I decided to wait until after dinner, when everyone was comfortably seated, their plates cleared. And the conversation had started to ebb. As I cleared the table, my heart raced. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of my purpose. This was about more than just revenge, it was about closure, about reclaiming my dignity in front of those who mattered. I was ready to unveil the truth, and there was no turning back. The stage was set, and as I poured the last glasses of wine, I felt a rush of adrenaline course through me. Tonight, everything would change. I was ready to take control and expose the betrayal that had shattered my world. The dinner party was in full swing, the room alive with chatter and laughter, the soft clinking of glasses underscoring the joyous atmosphere. As I glanced around the table, I felt a rush of anticipation mixed with anxiety. The moment I had been waiting for was drawing closer, and I could hardly contain the storm of emotions churning inside me. After dinner, I knew it was time. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest as I cleared my throat, the room gradually falling silent. Friends turned their heads, curiosity etched on their faces. I could feel their eyes on me, and at that moment, I realized the gravity of what I was about to do. "Hey, everyone," I began, forcing a smile even as my insides twisted with nerves. "Thank you all for coming tonight. It's great to see so many familiar faces and celebrate Tom's birthday together." A wave of applause and cheers filled the room, and I took a deep breath, feeling a surge of confidence. "But I need to address something that's been weighing heavily on my heart," I continued, my voice steady yet tinged with emotion. "It's about Julia and Josh." The room fell into a hushed silence, and I could feel the tension crackling in the air. I glanced at Julia, who was sitting at the table with a puzzled expression, her brow furrowed in confusion. Josh shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the casual demeanor from earlier fading away. "I've come across some evidence that I can no longer ignore," I stated, my voice rising slightly as I pulled out my phone. I held it up, the screen glowing in the soft light. "These are conversations between Julia and Josh that show just how far things have gone." As I began scrolling through the messages, gasps erupted from the table. I could see disbelief washing over their faces as I read aloud snippets of their conversations. I watched as shock morphed into confusion, then into outrage. "I can't wait to see you again," I read, my voice steady as I glanced at Julia, whose face had gone pale. "Or how about this one? It felt so right to be back in touch." The room was electric with tension. Friends exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from disbelief to concern. I continued, pulling up more evidence. Photos of Julia and Josh together, laughing, their body language intimate. "Look at how close they are," I said, turning the phone around for everyone to see. "This isn't just catching up, this is betrayal. I thought you were just friends." Tom exclaimed, breaking the silence, his voice laced with disbelief. I could see the shock reflected in his eyes, and it fueled my determination. "It's more than just friends, Tom," I replied, my voice firm. "They've been lying to all of us, and I can't stand by while they pretend that everything is fine." I felt a sense of catharsis as the truth spilled out. I had gathered the evidence, and now it was all laid bare before our friends. The stunned expressions on their faces were exactly what I had hoped for: shock, confusion, and disbelief all swirling together. "Julia, how could you do this?" One of our friends finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "We thought you two were happy." I can explain," Julia stammered, her voice trembling. I watched as she tried to regain her composure, but I could see the cracks forming in her facade. "It was a mistake, David. It didn't mean anything." "It didn't mean anything?" I shot back, incredulous. "You were meeting him behind my back. You told me you were working late or hanging out with friends while you were with him." The tension in the room was palpable as my friends processed the information. I saw Josh's expression shift from smugness to panic, and I reveled in the chaos that was unfolding before me. "I had to tell you all this because I can't allow this to continue in silence," I said, my voice steady. "This is about more than just me, it's about trust, friendship, and respect. If Julia and Josh can betray those closest to them, then how can we trust them moving forward?" The room erupted in murmurs as people began to process the implications of my revelation. Friends who had once adored Julia looked at her with a mixture of anger and disappointment. I could feel the weight of my words sinking in, the reality of the situation crashing down around us. Julia's defenses crumbled as she realized the extent of the damage. "David, please, don't do this," she pleaded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I made a mistake, but it wasn't what you think. We were just talking." "Just talking?" I echoed, my voice rising. "You were lying to me. You were spending time with him while I was left in the dark." The emotions swirling around the table reached a boiling point, and I felt a sense of vindication. I had fought for the truth, and now everyone could see the betrayal that had shattered my life. As I looked around the room, I could see my friends grappling with their feelings. Some were angry, others were confused, and a few looked outright devastated. I knew that the fallout from this night would ripple through our social circle, but I was willing to face the consequences. At that moment, I realized that I had reclaimed my power. I had exposed the truth, and while it hurt, it also set me free. I was ready to move on, to begin the process of healing, and to redefine my life without the shadows of betrayal lurking behind me. The room was thick with tension, the air heavy with unspoken words and emotions laid bare. Julia sat there, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling as she struggled to gather her thoughts. She looked so small, so vulnerable, and for a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. But it was quickly overshadowed by the wave of relief that washed over me. Finally, the truth was out, and I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The burden of deceit that had weighed heavily on my heart was lifted, and the feeling of liberation surged through me like a breath of fresh air. I had stood up for myself and exposed the betrayal, and now it was time for me to reclaim my life. "David, please," Julia sobbed, her voice cracking. "I never meant for it to go this far. I made a mistake, and I'm so sorry. It didn't mean anything, I swear." I watched her, taking in the desperation etched across her features. There was a part of me that wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay, but I quickly dismissed the thought. This was not about her, it was about me and my journey to reclaim my life. "Sorry doesn't cut it, Julia," I replied, my voice steady but firm. "You made a choice. You chose to betray me, to hide the truth, and that's not something I can overlook." Tears continued to flow down her cheeks as she pleaded for forgiveness, her words tumbling over each other in a desperate attempt to explain her actions. I was confused. It was a moment of weakness. I didn't think it would lead to this. I could see the pain in her eyes, and while part of me felt a fleeting sense of compassion, it quickly faded as the reality of her betrayal settled in. This wasn't about her momentary lapse, it was about the shattered trust, the lies, and the love I had given her so freely. As I stood there, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Tom, his expression a mixture of sympathy and support. "You did the right thing, David," he said quietly, his voice a calming presence in the chaos. "We're all here for you. You're not alone in this." His words resonated deep within me, and I glanced around the room to see other friends nodding in agreement. The support of those I cared about wrapped around me like a warm embrace, and for the first time since I discovered the truth, I felt a sense of belonging. It was clear that everyone was processing the situation differently. Some friends were glaring at Julia, their disappointment evident, while others were quietly absorbing the shock. I could see the myriad of emotions playing out across their faces: anger, confusion, heartbreak. I can't believe she would do this to you, one of our friends, Kate, said, her voice filled with disbelief. You didn't deserve this, David. You're a great guy. Exactly, Tom added, his grip on my shoulder tightening in solidarity. We all care about you, and we'll stand by you through this. With their support, I felt a renewed sense of strength. This was my moment of triumph, my chance to rise above the pain and heartache. I was no longer the victim, I was taking control of my narrative. Julia continued to sob, her cries echoing in the silence that had fallen over the room. David, please, I'll do anything to make it right. She begged, desperation lacing her words. Making it right would have meant being honest from the start, I replied, my heart firm in my resolve. You chose to lie, to deceive. I can't just forget that. The look of devastation on her face was palpable, and yet I felt no sympathy. Instead, I felt empowered. I had stood up for myself, and I had the support of my friends behind me. As the tears continued to fall, I realized that I didn't need her approval or her validation anymore. I had friends who cared about me, and who stood by me through thick and thin. I was no longer isolated in my pain, I was surrounded by a community that lifted me when I needed it the most. Tonight, I've learned who my real friends are, I said, looking around the table, my voice steady and strong. You all mean the world to me, and I won't let one person's betrayal define my life. The room erupted in applause, and I felt a surge of gratitude toward my friends. They rallied around me, their support a reminder that I was not alone in this journey. At that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. I was ready to move forward, to start anew, and to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. I was no longer bound by the chains of betrayal, I was free. Julia's cries faded into the background as I turned my focus to my friends, the ones who truly mattered. Together, we would navigate this storm, and I knew that brighter days were on the horizon. The weight of the past was lifting, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. After the devastating revelation, I found myself standing at a crossroads, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. The aftermath of Julia's betrayal had left me feeling like I was free falling through a void, but deep down, I knew I had a choice to make. I could wallow in the pain of what had been, or I could rise from the ashes and start anew. I chose the latter. I spent the following days in a daze, going through the motions of daily life while grappling with the remnants of my shattered relationship. However, as I slowly emerged from the fog, a flicker of determination ignited within me. I decided that this was my opportunity to rediscover myself, to explore the passions I had long neglected in the wake of my marriage. The first step was to sign up for a painting course that I had always wanted to take. Art had always been a source of solace for me, a way to express my thoughts and feelings that I often struggled to articulate. The idea of immersing myself in creativity filled me with hope, and I eagerly awaited the start of the classes. As I stepped into the art studio for the first time, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. The scent of paint and turpentine wafted through the air, and the vibrant colors on the canvases around me felt like a world of possibilities waiting to be explored. I grabbed my easel and set up in front of a blank canvas, ready to unleash my emotions onto the surface. With each brushstroke, I found myself losing track of time. The pain of betrayal began to transform into something tangible, and I could feel the weight of my past gradually lifting. I painted landscapes, abstract forms, and expressions of raw emotion. It was liberating to pour my heart into my art, and I discovered a newfound sense of purpose. Encouraged by my progress, I decided to take a leap and embark on a journey across Europe. I wanted to explore new places, meet new people, and embrace the adventure that lay ahead. It was time to shed the remnants of my old life and dive into the unknown. I mapped out a route that included cities I had always dreamed of visiting: Paris, Rome, Barcelona, and Amsterdam. Each destination promised a unique experience, a chance to immerse myself in different cultures, and to connect with others who shared my passion for life. As I traveled from one city to another, I encountered an array of fascinating people. There was a fellow traveler in a Parisian cafe who shared her story of heartbreak and resilience, and we spent hours exchanging tales over cups of coffee and croissants. In Rome, I met an artist who had dedicated his life to capturing the beauty of the city. And he encouraged me to let go of my inhibitions and embrace my creativity fully. Every interaction reminded me that I was not alone in my struggles. Others had faced their challenges and had emerged stronger, and I was inspired by their stories of renewal. With each passing day, I felt myself growing more confident and alive. I explored the winding streets, visited museums, and marveled at the beauty of the architecture. I laughed, danced, and allowed myself to feel the joy of living again. I was becoming the person I had always wanted to be, unburdened by the past. As my journey continued, I began to discover a sense of happiness that I had thought was lost forever. I found joy in the little things. Watching the sunrise over the Eiffel Tower, wandering through the vibrant markets of Barcelona, and getting lost in the charm of Amsterdam's canals. Each experience enriched my soul, and I started to realize that life was full of unexpected wonders waiting to be embraced. I also made connections with fellow travelers who shared my newfound zest for life. We formed bonds that felt genuine and uplifting, each of us encouraging the other to chase our dreams and to live fully. Together, we explored hidden gems in every city, sharing laughter and stories late into the night. One evening, as I sat on a rooftop terrace overlooking the sparkling lights of the city, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over me. I raised my glass in a toast to new beginnings, to the friends I had made, and to the lessons I had learned along the way. At that moment, I understood that the betrayal I had endured was not the end, it was merely a chapter in my life. It had forced me to confront my pain, to dig deep within myself, and to emerge with a renewed sense of purpose. I was no longer defined by my past, I was sculpting a future filled with possibilities. With a smile on my face and hope in my heart, I looked toward the horizon, knowing that many adventures awaited me. I had learned to embrace change, to find strength in vulnerability, and to welcome whatever life had in store for me. The world was vast, and I was ready to explore it, one brushstroke at a time.